Right, yes, this is the rematch. I'm going to start off actually just by mentioning Gareth is nominated this year for Ride the Blue Horse.
Yes.
Was it on a slate, was it? Good. Okay, we'll talk about it then. And you also won, as you said, the BSFA novel in 2013. I'm trying to think what I had out in 2013. Now these awards, how much credence do you put in them? I mean, they're very nice to have. Are they a validation? Does that mean you've arrived?
Yes, winning the BSFA was probably the single biggest thing in my entire life, apart from obviously getting married and having children. But yeah, I as anyone who was at EasterCon up in Edinburgh will probably remember my acceptance speech, which consisted of one very short word beginning with F. Because I was flabbergasted, to be honest, to have won it. But it does feel like a huge validation, because awards like the BSFA are voted for by people in this room, people who actually read the books and vote for the books they like and the books they read. Quite apart from their literary merit, I have to say, because obviously I felt there were some books on that ballot that were of more literary merit than maybe a book about a drunk monkey. But actually having that many people vote for it, and to tie with Anne Leckie as well, was just astounding, because her book was just one of my favourite books from that year, and that was just incredible, and it looks fantastic on the mantelpiece.
Fair enough. Now there was a slightly suspect figure floating around, and has been floating around, that 60% of adults in the UK believe that writing is the dream job.
What percentage have tried it?
Yeah, good point. Are you a full-time writer now?
I am, yes.
Yes. So you did a degree in humanities, I believe.
Yes.
Now does that help shape your writing? Does it make you an optimist or a pessimist about humans and where we're heading?
Well, it ate up 3 years. It was more of a multiple choice degree for people that don't really know what they wanted to study, because it covers all the humanities, from psychology, philosophy, geography, history, arts, drama, everything. So it was 3 years of just doing just enough about everything to realise I didn't really know about anything. But it was in the wilds of the Welsh valleys, where the sun never rises and the snow never melts, and it was fun. But for a writer, I think it was a good introduction, because it did kind of spark my interest a little bit in philosophy and psychology and sociology and all these sort of soft sciences that are quite good to have a background in when you're writing about new societies and building worlds and things, just to have in the back of your mind, oh, hang on, I remember what we did in sociology and philosophy, but also because it wasn't a science degree, and I'm pretty self-taught in science, which is why I probably make up 90% of the science I use in my books. Having that kind of humanities, I think, anchors the stories a little more in the human world as opposed to the scientific world, and kind of I think it creates a bit of a bridge between the two.
I'm going to come back to the technology, but am I right, you combine that with creative writing?
Yeah, one of the streams of the degree, one of the options you could do was creative writing,
right,
which I did for 3 years with Tony Curtis, the Welsh poet, not the, and Helen Dunmore.
Right.
One of my tutors there for 3 years, which was that really set me on the path to science fiction, because I'd always loved science fiction, and Tony, who ran the majority of the workshops, detested it with an almost religious zeal, to the fact where he wouldn't review science fiction in the workshops. So I started writing science fiction very assiduously to really annoy him. Most of what I did in those workshops, he'd say, "Oh, I don't like stories I don't like stories with punctuation. I like free form stories. So I'd write with incredible amounts of punctuation, all about aliens. And, so it was quite an antagonistic relationship, but I think it really set me on the path.
So have you always read science fiction?
Oh yeah, right from. I remember being very, very young, probably about 4 or 5, and being taken to our local village library and picking up the Brian Earnshaw's Dragonfall 5 books. I don't know if anyone remembers those.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're for young readers, but they're about a family who live on a battered tramp freighter, flying from planet to planet. They get to the planet of the cowboys and the planet of the, I can't remember now, planet of the long grass, I think. And they go around each time they have an adventure. But it was very much the proto. There's probably echoes of that in every space opera I've written since, of the battered old freighter going from world to world. And so I grew up on that, and then I moved on to, there was a series about a group of astronauts, which I can't remember the name of. There was an English one, an American one, a Russian one, and in each book they had various adventures. They went to a different planet in each book, I can't remember that one. But from there, I moved straight on to the Arthur C. Clarke books, because they had sort of big spaceships on the cover, and then Larry Niven, and I just worked my way through this whole shelf in the local library. And didn't really want to read anything else until I got a bit older and then started being sucked into sort of the mainstream, as you do.
So, yeah, while we're on influence, let's do the influences now then. So a fairly standard route then, Clarke, Niven, presumably Heinlein, all that.
Yeah.
Today?
I had the Clarke Niven influences. I think if anyone reads my very first novel, Silver Sands, you can kind of see them in there a bit. But sort of midway through writing them, I read Neuromancer by William Gibson, and I completely changed on the subject. And I was struggling to write this sort of big, scientific kind of 1960s Niven Clarke-esque fiction. I just couldn't do it because I didn't have the background, I didn't have the knowledge, and I certainly didn't have the ability to go back to the 1960s and publish it. But yeah, Neuromancer just turned that on its head, because suddenly there were all these very, very human characters scrabbling around kind of in the ruins of the civilization like that. And I could relate to that, and that finally, it was like a switch going in my head. I was thinking, okay, not everything has to be about big brave Captain Kirk types going out and conquering the universe. I can write about everyday people living with this technology, living with this stuff, finding their own uses for it. And that was really a eureka moment for me.
Right. I just wanted to touch on something you mentioned before. And it's a question a lot of us get, is how do you write your technology with authority? You said you came up with the humanities.
Yeah.
But anyone who's read your work, there's a believability there.
Yeah. I very much want the technology I use to be, if not right, then at least plausible. Where I know how to make it right, I'll make it right. And where I don't know how to make it right, I will be vague. In the monkey books, for instance, I needed some biological computer processes to interface with human brains as part of the plot, and I didn't know how to do that, so I just called them gelware and just let everyone refer to it quite casually. And I think from the name you kind of get a rough idea of what it's like.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to go into the nitty-gritty of explaining exactly how it interfaced and exactly how it worked, because that field is changing all the time. And I think if I tried to explain, it would have been out of date within months, because at the moment there's always some new development going on and people linking, people moving arms, or there was a monkey on the internet who was operating a digger in Milwaukee or something from Washington the other day. it's being vague and having a rough idea of sort of saying, I know what this does, and the story you kind of know what this does. We don't really need to know how it does it. So it's kind of like writing an adventure story in the 1920s, and the characters run out and jump in a car and drive off. You don't need to say the intricacies of the internal combustion engine for the audience, because they kind of, even if they live on a farm and they've never seen a car before, they kind of get the idea of you've got a wheel on each corner.
I was interested in your sources though, because the first thing I thought of when I saw Ex Machina was they have a kind of a gel fluid brain for these androids. I just wondered if that was in real science coming up and you tapped into that.
No, I think
You and Alex have come up with the same.
yeah. Unfortunately, I've not seen that film yet, but I think he's probably done the same kind of thing.
Mm.
He's gone, well, it's kind of gel. It'll work.
Yeah. Now, you tend to use. I'm getting into the nitty gritty of writing here, and it's back to the kind of thing you said you got into with Neuromancer. You have fairly short chapters. Now, Van Vogt is sort of the classic in our genre, although Gibson is a good example as well, of something happens all the time. Why not? Is that your favourite style? I mean, why not the huge book, the immersive book? What's wrong with that?
I think the way I write, especially with the Monkey books, which I wanted to be thrillers basically, is that I wanted to keep the pages turning.
Yeah.
So I think having very short, sort of 1,500 word chapters, and having every single one end on a cliffhanger of some sort, or a revelation or something, it keeps the pages going, it keeps people flicking through. And so instead of doing chapters with several scenes in, I made every scene a chapter on its own. And I don't know, it just kind of suits my pacing, because I kind of write, in those books I was writing very stripped down prose, very kind of basic, sort of, not quite Chandler-esque, but that kind of sort of almost journalistic kind of, they do this, then they do this. And so it kind of felt short, and the monkey as a character as well is quite explosive, and he has less of an attention span than I do. So it didn't feel right to have a great rambling book about his adventures, a very introspective kind of long book about them, because it's very short, it's sharp, and also like a good joke, you don't want to carry it on too long. Get in, tell the story, hit the punchline and get out. Which is not to say that they're joke books, but I didn't want him to wear too thin on the audience.
Right.
So possibly 3 books was a bit of a stretch, but it's so they're short, they're pacey, and I think they do what they set out to do, which is examine some issues, but in the context of a kind of rollicking adventure.
My experience is that something like that would take quite an effort to structure if you really have got to do some advanced plotting there.
They're all 3 books together are, well, all 4 books together actually, because my earliest Space Opera Recollection slots into it as well.
Oh, right, okay.
It's like watchwork, the kind of plotting. At one point I was sitting there with this mass of notes around me going, where the hell is everybody? There, I'm trying to just slot, because especially as they got scattered among various parallel timelines as well, trying to bring them all back together at the end was quite a feat of sort of narrative gymnastics. But it's, and to write shortly, and also to write kind of just, what I tried to do was get out of the way so that the reader wasn't reading my writing, they were just going with the flow. So I was trying not to put up anything that would jerk them out of that, any too florid language or whatever. So it was, to do that, it was quite a discipline actually. It looks like I'm having brilliant fun in there, and I am, don't get me wrong, but it was also, there was quite a lot of discipline where I'd find myself going off on some tangent and wanting to explain something, or talk about the Zeppelin in greater detail or something. I had to think, no, we've got to stick to the action. We have to stick to the plot and just follow through it.
Right. Now, when I was doing a little bit of research for tonight, I mean, I actually gave up trying to count how many short stories you've done. Which, is it an either or? Do you see yourself going more down the novel route these days? You planning to write that? Which are you comfortable with?
I started off doing short stories. I kind of learned. I wrote Silver Sands, which was my first novel, and then put it aside and wrote short stories for 10 years before I came back and started writing novels again properly. And since I've done that, I've written a lot fewer short stories because most of the ideas I have now seem to be about 90,000 words long. But I still bang out the odd one here and there when I have an idea. They're the kind of thing that I'll be in the bath or mowing the lawn or something, and I'll think, ooh, I know that'll be a short story.
Right.
As opposed to sort of sitting down purposefully to write them. I think I find it difficult because I've written a lot of novels back to back over the last few years. It's difficult. I find it difficult to change gears to short stories, but occasionally one will just kind of pop out of nowhere. Or someone will ring up and say, I need, I want to commission a short story, and then I sit down and right, how do I do these again? They're just like chapters, aren't they? But they have to be in everything in the one chapter. So, I like them. I've always enjoyed short stories. I think in a lot of ways they're the kind of heart of the genre.
Yeah.
Because the magazines and the anthologies are what draw a lot of people in, and they're where. So am I talking loud enough?
Yeah. Everyone here?
Yeah.
Puppy bear.
Okay. I know I'm quite quietly spoken. So, yeah. And they're where a lot of novelists learn their trade as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'll always write short stories, but at the moment I'm kind of focusing more on novels because I've got a lot of big novel-length stories I want to tell and want to get out.
Okay. Now you talked about it briefly before. You've done the Church of Accelerated Redemption is a collaboration. I've done a few of those myself with Gus and Graham Joyce. How was that as a writing experience? I mean, I knew Graham quite well, and we could criticise each other without falling out. I mean, it's quite a personal experience doing a story together. I mean, are you still talking to Aliette? I mean,
Yes, yeah, very much. It was actually an insane amount of fun. I knew Aliette from various conventions. I think we first started getting published in Interzone around the same time. And then at one convention in Heathrow, she came up and tugged on my sleeve while I was at the bar, and I turned around, this short girl there looking up at me, and she said something I couldn't understand, and I said, oh, sorry, pardon? Because I have trouble sometimes hearing in loud crowd situations. She said it again, I was like, no, so I'm still not getting it, and then suddenly it clicked, you saying, I am Aliette de Baudard. Oh! So I turned around to the people I was with, and Martin McGrath, that some of you might know, and said, can I introduce Aliette? And he leant forward and went, Mrs. Powell, so lovely to meet you. But a few years after that, we were, I think she was just writing her Inca detective books for Angry Robot. And I just started with Solaris, and we decided, we were joking around about maybe writing something together. I think the phrase was, let's double our audience. It wasn't a serious thing, but we kind of joked around and we thought, well, why not give it a try? And we kicked a few ideas around. Eventually we came up with, there was a photograph somebody had taken at a protest in Paris, which was a girl in a gas mask wearing a Hello Kitty t-shirt with a placard, and just the image was just so perfect. We thought, let's go with that, and turn it into a story. And it evolved into this story about an organisation rescuing AIs from corporate servers and smuggling them out and putting them to work in a think tank for the good of the world, a secret think tank. And it topped out around 11,000 words, I think. But the way we wrote it was quite fun because it was like that game, I don't know if you ever played at a party when you were kids, where someone will write a sentence and fold the paper over and pass it on. The next person will write a sentence and fold it and pass it back.
Consequences.
That's the one. We wrote it like that. Whereas I can't remember which one of us wrote the first scene, but we'd write 500 words or so, email it to the other person. They'd read that, then write the next 500 words, then email it back. And we had some idea where it was going. We had a rough idea of what the plot was going to be. But we just chucked it back and forward. And as it was set in Paris, and I was in Bristol and she was in Paris, she would go for walks and then come back and send me links on Google Street View and say, walk down Google Street View from here to here, and that's where this is, and that cafe on the corner, that's what we'll be using. So, okay. So we walked around Paris, like, virtually together. And it was fun. When we got to the end, we kind of emailed it back and forth a couple of times, then admitted we were at the end. And then we both went back and we both edited it. And we both rewrote it separately, and then kind of squashed our rewrites together. And came up with something that we actually quite enjoyed. We sent it off to Jetzer de Vries, who was at Solaris at the time and who was doing an anthology for them called Shine, which was an anthology of optimistic futures, and we thought that just about qualified as optimistic. And he came back and said he really liked the story, but he thought we should flip the genders of the two main characters. Which we did, and it actually made the story a lot stronger. We had to go back and do another rewrite in order to make that make sense. It made the story a lot stronger, and I think from what was just almost like a parlour game between two writers, we actually came out with a story that we were both sort of proud of, and I think it holds up.
It's novella length, isn't it? Is it?
It's just under 11,000 words, I think. So,
Yeah.
It's on that border.
Yes, I'm not that good on definition. To be repeated, any more like that?
I did do one with Paul Raven a couple of years later, which again was quite fun. Just mucking about, but a story came out of it as well. It's fun. I quite enjoyed the process because it makes you write. When you know there's another person who's working on this and they're waiting for your input, it makes you, as soon as you get the email, you think, oh crikey, but everything else aside was done. So you can get it back to them, and it becomes a bit of a race. With Paul, actually, it became a bit of a grudge match. It became a bit of a, right you bastard, get out of that. Because we would leave the characters in these terrible, perilous, hopeless positions and email it off. And he'd get it, go, oh. So he'd get them out of it and then write in some killer robots and send it back. And I'd go, what? Right. And it became a bit of a competition who could kill off the characters. But yeah, so that was kind of fun. These things they've not been serious. They've been fun.
Yeah.
And they've been, I suppose, the best analogy I can find is when I was a teenager and friends used to have bands. They used to go around with their guitars and sit in the living room, sort of jamming all the chords they knew. It's that kind of thing. It's just it's having a jam, really.
Yeah. I'm quite interested in the process here. You said you were doing other. I'm loath to call it multitasking. You can multi-write. You can do several stories at the same time.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Occasionally, sometimes when I was writing a lot of short stories, I would have three on the go at once, because when I got bored or stuck with one, I would switch to the next. So it kept me moving. And when I was working on the next, the problem I was trying to resolve in the first one would resolve itself, and I'd be able to go back. So.
Right. So I find that extraordinarily difficult. If I'm writing a book, I need to write the book and then go on to something else.
I don't think I could do it with novels, because to hold an entire novel in your head and just kind of be able to move it around and look at the various bits of it, I don't think I could do that with two at once, because there just isn't room in here. With short stories, it's easier. You can, but with a novel, it would be fairly impossible.
Now to get on to Akak Makak, did I pronounce that properly?
Yes.
I did. At the end of the first book, you wrote, because you first appeared in an Interzone short story?
Yes.
You wrote about how you came up with him and he just wouldn't get out of your mind, this character.
Yeah.
So I always say I start with one good idea and then almost work back from there. So your idea was the monkey.
it wasn't even the monkey, to be honest, it was just the name. Because I kind of play about with words in my head. I'm often just making up crap rhymes and talking. And one of the two, Akak, which I knew from reading Biggles books, is a type of anti-aircraft fire. And then obviously a macaque, as I found out after I made it up as a type of monkey, I thought it was like a possum or something. And those two, just Akak, macaque, it just, the rhythm of it went together too well, and it was just bouncing around in my head for ages, and finally I wrote it down. And then when I was writing the Interzone story, it was about a web animator who has an online series featuring a cartoon character, and I needed a cartoon character, so I flipped back through my notebooks. I came up with Akak macaque, and I thought that sounds like a cartoon character. So I looked at what a macaque was, turned out it was a monkey. And I thought with the anti-aircraft fire, it had to be a pilot, so it had to be a World War. In the short story, it was a World War I pilot in a Sopwith Camel. In the novels, I upgraded it to World War II. If that's an upgrade, I don't know.
It was kind of World War II, wasn't it?
Yeah, kind of World War II. But because I wanted to use Spitfires, because they're just great. Yeah, so it kind of, everything came from the name, who he was. And as soon as I decided he was a pilot, I knew he had an eye patch. I knew he had a cigar. I think a bit of John Belushi from 1941 probably fed its way in there. And a lot of people have said they remind him of Hellboy as well, but I hadn't seen or read Hellboy at that point. But a few years after this second novel came out, I actually saw the film Hellboy and went, yeah, that's kind of where it came from. It just kind of came from mucking around with words and that two accidentally kind of accreting and sparking off.
But the idea was had the same germ, didn't it? I mean, in the short story, he's part of the game program.
Yeah.
And he was born as part of the game program in the novel as well.
Yeah.
And then both of them become a lot more. I'm going to go on to a theme here, which I noticed. I mean, it was mentioned a lot, and fair enough, in Akak about this idea of continuity of humans, the transfer of downloaded minds and whatever, which is talked about now a bit more in the mainstream press. It seems to be quite a thing with you, or is it just something you latched onto as part of this?
Yeah, it's a theme that's emerged out of my work that I didn't consciously realise was going to. Like all the themes that come out, I think you write and then you find yourself returning to the same issues again and again and again. And one of the things is something that's bothered me since I was, I don't know, probably about 10 years old. I remember lying in bed one night, very late at night, and thinking, if I fall asleep now, and wake up tomorrow and don't remember being awake and thinking these thoughts, will I be the same person that I am now? I was a very serious child. I'm worrying about that, and that's kind of stuck with me, and the idea that you are your memories in a lot of way. And if you don't have your memories, or your memories get taken away from you, who then are you? Are you the same person? Can you be held responsible for things you've done if you don't remember them? Can the influences you have, how much of a part of them are you if you can forget them? And yeah, that's always sort of fascinated me on some level. I think these books was very much, I describe these three books as my midlife crisis, because the hero starts off as this invincible, action-packed monster, and then through the three books he becomes vulnerable, he becomes mortal, he gathers a family around him, he becomes cautious. And it's very much it's the kind of book somebody who was turning 40 would write. That's what I was doing. But when I first sat down to write them, I kind of wanted to explore what it means to be human. And in order to do that, I needed people who weren't quite human. So I had Victoria, who is the other main character of the books, who has had half of her brain replaced with this gelware after a helicopter accident. And so half her thoughts are organic and half of them are running on artificial processes, and she's not entirely sure where the join is. And then I had her ex-husband Paul, who is actually dead at the start of the first book. He was supposed to be my because each of the books is like a murder mystery. He was my murder victim in the first book, but he wouldn't shut up. So there's an electronic copy of him. So he used to be human and thinks he is human, but isn't really. So you've got one woman who's not sure if she's human, somebody who used to be human. You've got the prince. I don't want to give too much away about the Prince of Wales, but he discovers he's not entirely what he thinks he is, and that bit's based on reality. Then I've got the monkey, who never has been human, but has been uplifted to a kind of equivalent level. So I've got kind of 3 or 4 different ways of attacking the idea of what it means to be human by not examining the humans, but examining the people around them.
And you also have Victoria duplicated as well.
Yes, yeah, the idea of having the same consciousness copied into other bodies and other instances, and although they start at the same root, and that's explored again in this book especially, where characters meet other versions of themselves and their friends from other parallel universes, and there's how much continuity is there and how much is different, and how much of that is due to experience and how much of that is innate. I don't think I come up with any hard and fast answers to any of those questions.
But they're interesting questions.
They're interesting questions, and they're the kind of questions you ask yourself at 4 a.m, looking in the bathroom mirror, going, "Who am I? Do I exist?"
But it's science fiction speciality, isn't it, to ask questions like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. If I had a time machine, I would love to go back and give that book to Philip K. Dick and say, "Monkeys, Phil, read it." I think we'd have something to talk about.
Now, I mean, they are fun to read, but I've seen a little bit of politics creeping in. Do you think, I mean, most books reflect what the artist sees around them. Do you consciously put in things you're seeing around you? Do you reflect your thoughts of the day when you're writing? Does politics create? It's interesting now we're getting a referendum to split the continent, given you had it combined. Is this a conscious decision, or is it just for plot convenience?
The idea of the United Europe was one of the things that kicked off the trilogy, not for political reasons, but because I read a Guardian article in 2007 that said when they were declassifying government documents, there was one that said about in 1956, Guy Mollet, the French premier, came to London and said, "Look, the French economy is in trouble, we're having problems in Suez, we were good friends during the war, how about a political alliance? We'd even let you have the Queen as the head of this alliance, even though we all our royal family." And Anthony Eden, the British Prime Minister, turned around and went, "No," and sent him on his way. But
Well, that was a real, because that's how the book starts, isn't it? That was a real thing.
that's the real thing. That's why I put that at the front of the books. That's exactly where it all came from. That was the point. In my history, the Suez Crisis went slightly differently and was more successful for Britain and France, which kind of drove a bit of a wedge between Britain and America. So this merger of France and the UK took place, and Norway joined in, and eventually we ended up with a Europe based around London and Paris rather than Paris and Berlin as we have now. So I just thought that was a fascinating bit of real alternate history that no one had explored before. So I thought I'd nip in and do it before anyone else did. So it started off like that, but I realised because the British monarchy features quite heavily in the book, and this United Europe features quite heavily in the book, I did also put in a few dissenting voices as well. So there are other voices, and especially in the third book, Akak goes on this massive rant about all politicians are bastards and being left alone and to his own devices. So there's some politics in there, but I'm not trying to write a political book, but I don't think you can write a book set on an international stage without bringing politics into it.
Yeah. Now, is it, including the collections, is it 6 books you've written?
Had published, yeah.
Not published, right.
Yeah.
Because recollection is not part of the ICAC. Well, you said it fitted in.
It does, yeah. If you read the final ACAC book, Macaque Attack, it does, all the characters from the recollection show up.
Oh, right. Because that is, I know it starts off in London, but it is a far future space opera.
Yes. Yeah.
A favourite part of the genre?
Oh yeah. So first, space opera is. There's a great quote by Brian Aldiss. I can't remember it word for word, but it says something like, "Science fiction is a muscular, horny beast. Its skin rippling with sensors and cryoreceptors. It has a smaller sister. She has a dash of ruby lips and a dash of starlight in her hair, and her name is space opera." And space opera, I think, has been my first love and always will be. And since finishing the Monkey books, I've written 2 more and plotted out 3 or 4 others. And I think, I'm very much, space opera is where it's at for me in terms of spaceships and trader captains and spaceport bars and weird ancient alien technology. That's my sweet spot.
I've got down here, I call space opera the freedom of the future, in which you really can write whatever you want to write about, whatever theme,
Absolutely.
whatever technology, whatever idea comes up, you can work it into a far future setting.
Absolutely. It's like going from, I'm trying to think of an analogy, from playing like a little Casio keyboard to playing a church organ. I'm quite constrained in this alternate history of Europe, space opera.
Well, that ties in with my next question. I mean, you've done the 3 Macaque books. That's it. I mean, there's always a danger of, and I felt this when I started writing, that I don't want to be the author of known as the author of one series. I know what I'm going to be known as, but I try not to do just, you're not the ACAC author.
No.
Or would it bother you if you were? If the obituary comes out and he wrote ACAC, Macaque and other works?
To be honest, I think we're past that stage now, and I'm saddled with him forever. But I don't want to be the monkey man.
Yeah.
For the rest of the time. It's and the books I'm writing at the moment are very, very different and very, in terms of style and in terms of content and subject, are very, very different. I'm hoping it's just. It was just a phase I was going through. But I'm very fond of them, and I always said after the 3rd one, no more, that's it. And then last year I was on a train on the way up to Liverpool, and I had some time to kill, and I accidentally wrote a complete outline for another one. So it'll probably never see the light of day, but...
That's what Harper Lee said.
Yeah, well, my wife, as I was writing the 3rd one from Solaris, she came up to me and said, "Don't kill him off. He might be our pension."
You also did a comic strip.
Yes.
How was that different from pure prose? I mean, you got the illustration. A picture paints 1,000 words.
Yeah.
How was it easy, or was it just simply different? What was the experience there?
It was very different. I was when the first Macaque book came out from Solaris. I'd been reading 2000 AD since I was 8 or 9 years old. I still have them, well, like 1979, 2000 AD annual on my bookshelf. And because obviously the editor of 2000 AD sits about 10 feet away from the editor of Solaris in the office, I saw an opportunity. So I convinced them to do a 5-page prequel script to the novel, so that they could run this cartoon adventure about the monkey and then whack in a big page advert for the book and have some sort of cross advertising. And to my great surprise, they went for it. So I produced this script, and it was, the good thing about 2000 AD is their website tells you how to format the scripts they use. And they have example scripts, so you can see exactly how they want it. So I knew how to format it, and I went through. But what I realised is when I'm writing novels, a lot of the time when I'm writing a chapter or a scene, I'll write all the dialogue first, just to get a feel of what the characters are doing, and they're sparking off each other, and it goes in different ways. And then I'll kind of flesh out the description and the actions. So it was very much like that, in that I wrote a lot of the dialogue, but then I had to squash the dialogue into various frames, which is something quite different, because you can't, in one frame, you can't light a cigar, cock his shotgun, and do 3 or 4 other things. It just has to be one thing, but you have to encapsulate a lot of that in dialogue, but in very, very spare dialogue. So it was interesting. It was something I'd love to do more of, but very, very, very different from writing a novel.
Yeah. So nothing else planned on that at the moment?
No.
I'm going to ask the fan question. What about film and TV? Any offers that you can talk about?
There was one that I got very excited about, which was a chap who, I won't name him, but he was the vice president of a company that makes a lot of stoner comedies, for want of a better word. Lots of comedies with a certain bearded, quite gruff gentleman who smokes a lot of dope and makes a lot of comedies. He was the vice president of the company that produces those, and he wrote me a letter and said, "Hey, are the rights for this book still available? I've seen the cover. I like monkeys." But that was 2 years ago. We haven't heard anything since, so I'm assuming he put out whatever he was smoking and probably forgot it.
So fairly standard for novelists.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was no suggestion he'd read it. So.
Now the book coming out next year is a collection?
Yes. There's a short story collection where I'm talking to Newcom Press about a short story collection, which will be mostly uncollected stories, but maybe 1 or 2 from my first collection as well.
Is this the Reef book?
The Last Reef, yeah.
The Last Reef.
Which came out in 2008, but very, very promptly went out of print because Elastic Press shut up shop shortly afterwards.
Right.
For unrelated reasons.
And after that, you mentioned you're back on the space opera after that.
Yes, I've written 2 space operas since since finishing the Monkey Book trilogy, and I've got 3 or 4 more planned out. So I'm very much out amongst the stars at the moment, and battering away, and hopefully there should be some news about those at some point in the near future.
Okay, fair enough. Anything you'd like to add? Anything I've missed?
I can't think of anything offhand, apart from if you do want to go and get one of those ballads, I do have a short story on it. That was the way that short story came about was totally unexpected. It was saying I don't write many short stories anymore, but I had out of the blue one day I had an email that just said, "Well, hello, Mr. Powell, blah blah blah. We would like to commission you to write a short story for an article we're doing about climate fiction. It'll be about 1,000 words." And I thought, so I wrote back and said, "Well, I'm in the middle of this novel at the moment. I have a deadline, but when would you want it by?" And this was on Wednesday morning, and they wrote back and said, "Friday." So I wrote back and said, "Well, I'm not entirely sure I can do that." And they came back and said, "It'll be published alongside work by Margaret Atwood and Bruce Sterling. We'll pay you $1,000. Friday is all right, yes. So, yeah.
I am fascinated and envious of people who can write short stories these days. My gold standard for short stories is Roald Dahl, who encapsulates everything. Characters, beginning, middle, and a kick ending as well.
Yeah.
And that's in short stories. That's just about beyond me these days. But you can still switch between the two forms?
Occasionally,
Or it is all novels these days?
occasionally. The promise of a check makes it a lot easier.
Well, yes. Yeah.
But it was also the kind of adrenaline rush of thinking, oh my god, this is going to be sandwiched between something by Margaret and Bruce and me. It's like, oh god, I've got to deliver. So I thought, I can't possibly do this. I went and had a bath, got out of the bath, and I knew exactly what the story was. And it just works like that sometimes. Baths are magic.
I think it was Michael Moorcock who had a dedication which I always envied, which is to my creditors a constant source of inspiration. But yes, I mean, the novels do tend to take over. I think you see that in a lot of science fiction writers. You start off with the shorts, and Larry Niven said the thing you've got to learn eventually is to say no, because there was a time when you were all knocking at the door trying to get in, and then people come to you. It's a big flip.
Yes, very, very much. I haven't got that many people banging on the door to have to say no very often at the moment. But once you start to get, you're bogged down in a novel and it starts to eat up 6 to 8 months of your life. If somebody comes to you in the middle wanting a short story, it's very, very hard just to turn the novel off and come up with an idea that is readable and piquant and whatever in 5,000 words when your brain is grappling with 90,000. It's a very different discipline in some ways.
So the novels you're working on now, are they completely different universe?
Yes.
They are. So did you enjoy doing something different?
Yeah, I'm very fond of the Monkey books, but I lived with him for 3 years, and it was he's not the best housemaid. He's when you've got a character who won't tolerate a moment's exposition without getting bored and shooting somebody. And any scene, any dramatic tension, he'll usually puncture it by biting somebody in the face. And it kind of rewrites, it makes him quite difficult to plot and quite difficult to control within a book. So I had to have some very strong secondary characters to stop him from completely taking over. But as I say, by the end of it, when I had people coming up to me in conventions going, "You're the Monkey Man," I was thinking, no, I've got to write something else. But
I mean, it's nice to get that kind of appeal. He's not a comedy character, but he is a fun character.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want him to be kind of like a one joke thing. He's very deep and he's very troubled. And a lot of comedy comes from his sense of alienation, I suppose. With the people around him, with the fact that he reacts angrily because he's a bit at sea in a lot of ways, and he doesn't understand, he can't relate to people. There's one scene very early on in the first book where somebody smiles at him and he says, "Don't do that because
I'll think of it.
You bear, you're teasing me, I'll rip your face off." Yeah, so it's and thing with eye contact as well, with primates as well, is not bad. So I tried to make him not just to go in a rubber suit either, but to respond as a monkey would and to move like a monkey would, and be as selfish and greedy as a monkey would, but also have this sort of essentially deeply lonely kind of human soul to it that doesn't know what it's looking for, but over the course of the books gradually finds it.
Okay. I think we've run our course. We might just take the Q&As a fraction early. I'm sure Gareth has generated quite a bit of interest there. If anyone's got the first question.
You said you started off reading juveniles like Rhino and George, 5, etc., etc. Have you ever thought of writing Steve that stuff? Even the great Mr. Hamilton has written a juvenile. Sorry, he's written a book for juveniles. Sorry.
My children aren't all juveniles.
I don't care what you call them.
2 or 3 years ago, I was doing an event at Waterstones in Bristol. There were several other novelists on the panel. There was Emma Newman and Tim Moore and a few other people. And my family were in the audience, and it came to the point where they said, are there any questions from the audience? And this little hand went up the back, said, oh yes, little girl at the back, and stood up, it was my youngest daughter. And she said, I've got a question for Daddy. When are you going to write a book for me? Yeah.
And the answer was?
Not only have I thought about writing one, I'm constantly nagged to write. But the trouble is they're growing up so fast that if I started writing one now, by the time I finished it, they'd be too old for it, and I'd have to... Yeah, so no, the books, the monkey books got too much swearing and violence in for children, and the books, I don't know, I'm my target audience at the moment, and I like swearing and violence. So yeah, I've tried to write a YA last year, and it died after a couple of chapters. I haven't quite got I'm not quite in tune with my teenage self.
I should have asked that before. We were on about plotting. Is the whole book plotted out? You said it just died on you. I think. Do you plot out the whole book?
I tend to plot out most of the book. What I do is, I guess if you were drawing a map, if the book was a map, I don't draw like a complete ordnance survey with all the different changes in height and road numbers and everything. I do kind of a back of an envelope thing with a dotted line, and there's a post office and there's a church and there's a swamp, and I kind of meander between it. I know I've got to get to the post office and the church and the swamp, but how I get there is a bit of a ramble.
Right.
Whereas I've met other people who I was talking to. I wrote a post on my website actually a few months ago. I talked to Paul Cornell about how he does it, and he had just written a book by writing numbers 1 to 50 on a piece of paper, and each of those was a chapter. And then he wrote what was going to have 2,000 words each, and that was a 100,000 word novel, and that was plotted out. He said, and I think it came to about 30,000 words of outline. He said all I have to do is go through and put he said and she said at various points. So no, I don't do that level. Usually my outline for a book will be 2 or 3 pages of typed A4, and it'll be literally, they go here, then they go there, then they go there, and if I'm a bit stuck, brackets, then something cool happens, and brackets, and think of a way to get out of this, brackets. And then I'll go through and write it, and then by the time I get to the bit where I have to think how to get out of it, I'll either know or don't. But occasionally I can put together what seems like a brilliant outline, and I start writing it and realise it is a brilliant outline, but for somebody else. It's not a story I feel capable of telling.
Would that be another collaboration?
Possibly. Possibly. I could do that, but it's... So I do have a few sort of discarded outlines that I couldn't quite bring to air, I quite cynically sat down about a year ago and thought, what's selling? I know, near future space thrillers, and sat down and plotted one out and wrote about 5,000 words of it and decided, no, I want to write space opera.
Gareth, I'd just be really interested in your journey to getting published by a mainstream publisher. I've got Silver Sands from Pendragon, and I think we had some issues there, and Recollection was by a mainstream publisher, and then obviously Agonology is by Solaris. But was that a long journey? Was it a difficult journey? How did you get onto the radar of the mainstream guys?
Right, my struggle, in short. Yeah, it was. I started writing short stories back in, I can't remember now, 2004, 2003, 2004. I wrote Silver Sands around the turn of the millennium, and then, as I say, put it aside and tinkered with it for about 10 years before it saw the light of day. But in that 10 years, I started writing stories. I started publishing them on very small, like internet sites, like Aphelion was one, and Quantum News was another. Just sending them these stories, and they would publish them, but then they had quite lively comment sections where people would feedback about the story and chat about it. that was quite incredibly helpful because I was getting feedback at the same time as because I didn't know anybody who was into writing at the time. I didn't know anybody who was into sci-fi at the time. So I didn't really have a network like the Orbiter, but since Discover I didn't have that kind of network or anything. So I was just publishing these stories. I did like 3 or 4 online on these sites, and I was getting reasonably good feedback on them. And then when I felt ready, and when I felt I'd written a story that was good enough, I sent it off to Interzone, because Interzone had been my goal since I was a student and had a big stack of, I think everyone else in my shared house had a big stack of porn at the door. I had a big stack of Interzones. And so, I just wanted to, the old David Pringle ones with you and Stephen Baxter and Charlie Stross, I think, was just appearing in them at the time. And, definitely Eric Brown. And I thought that was, Interzone that was my pinnacle, that was my goal, that was my mountain I had to climb. And so once I thought, I think it was about the 5th or 6th story I wrote seriously, because I'd always wanted to be in writing. It was the turn of the millennium. I turned 30 in the year 2000, and thought, right, it's time to, or get off the pot. And so I started trying to write seriously. And at the 5th or 6th one, there was a story called The Last Reef, and I sent it off to Interzone, and they picked it up. And it went on and got quite a good reception, so I was quite pleased. But off the back of that story, I got contacted by Andrew Hook, who was running Elastic Press, and he said, I really, really, really enjoyed that story. Have you ever thought about putting together a collection? I thought, I've already written 5. So I wrote, of course I wrote back and said, absolutely, yes. And ran off and wrote 10 more. But we worked together for that for a couple of years, and then my next story with Interzone was the original Macaque story. That was my second one with Interzone. And that really did quite well. I think it came first in the readers' poll for that year, and then lots of people made a bit of a fuss about it, and that got me to the attention of Pendragon. It turns out I went to the same university as the guy who ran Pendragon, and it was very embarrassing. These names just shot straight out of my head. Chris Teague, of course. Really bad with retaining names. But he, so we got chatting, and then he took a look at Silver Sands and said he'd put it out. So at that point, Silver Sands had been in a drawer for like nine years or whatever. So those two came out within a year or two of each other, 2008, 2010, I think. But meanwhile, I'd been putting everything I learned writing the short stories into writing a proper book, which was the recollection, and I'd written about 3 chapters of it. And I was in a hotel bar talking to Lee Harris from who was at Angry Robot at the time, and I pitched it to him, and he said, yeah, send it to me. So I sent him what I had, and he said, I like it, but it's not where Angry Robot's going anymore, because they were more into their kind of cross-genre stuff at this time. So he took me by the collar and marched me across the bar to John Oliver and said, John, Gareth's writing a book and it would be perfect for Solaris. So, John said, I'll be the judge of that. But said, can you send it to me? So I sent it to him, and he did actually like it and did take it. So he said, can you write it in 6 months? And I did. I actually handed it in 4 months early, which I was very proud of. Last time I'd done that. And it kind of went from there. And then, after the recollection, John phoned me up and said, got any other books you want to write? And I said, yes. Give me 20 minutes. And when he came back and went, I've got this idea about a monkey on a zeppelin. And bless him, he said, yeah, just whatever, 6 months. So, that's kind of how it went. It was very much kind of slogging away at the short stories till I got a bit of attention, and then kind of just, people recognising that there was something there and shuffling it around till somebody actually took something.
How important is an editor to you? I mean, are you one of these people that gets enraged every time a comma is corrected? Or do you take editorial notes quite well?
I don't get enraged. What I tend to find is that for me a novel is kind of like running a marathon, and as you stagger over the finish line, your editor comes up to you and goes, "That's really good. Can you go back and run miles 7 to 12 again? But can you run them kind of like this? I'm not, not quite so runny, 45% less runny, and 10% more joggy." And you think, "Oh God!" And or it's like a house of cards, and they go, "Can you take that one out and replace it?" And you think, "Oh, fuck!" And it just try for it not to all fall down. But I've never not made a change that an editor suggested.
Right.
Because however much I find it depressing and hard work, because I want my first drafts to be brilliant and people to worship them, and then they don't, and I actually go, "God, I've got to do some actual work." They know. I've always figured that they know more than I do. They've read more books than I do. They know what sells in their market. They know what success they've had. So they probably have a much better idea of how to fix this book than I do. So I always tend to make the changes, and I always tend to respect them. And I've been blessed that I've had some very good editors in my time. In the fact that some editors who've gone, "No, it's Better Monkey, I'm not touching it," and some editors who, have gone, "Actually, that scene to completely come out and to lose that character." So, I would say for me, editors are very, very important, like a necessary evil, I suppose, like going to the dentist.
Interesting. Same answer I would have given. You had a question.
I was just going to ask. I mean, I presume when you're actually, writing, you're in the moment, you're living it. But the rest of the time, do you think about how it will be received, or what people are looking for, or something that you would like to do, but would it go down well? Or you just do what you want all of the time?
I wrote a trilogy about a drunken monkey. There's no commercial profile for that at all. There's part of you has got to think like you've got to kind of believe you're writing something that's going to be, if not a bestseller, at least not universally reviled. You've got to believe that someone will read it, and I think I flippantly said earlier that I was my target market, and that's kind of true, because I kind of write the books that I want to read, that are written in the way that I would like to read books, and so that I have to believe there are other people out there that like books written the same as I like books. So I'm kind of writing in that way. As to things I wouldn't write, there are things I can't write, as I mentioned earlier, that I've tried to write and just failed at writing. There's nothing yet that I thought I can't possibly write about because it's too rude or too outrageous or too shocking. Or apart from once, actually, Jonathan Oliver dared me to give him 50,000 words of 50 Shades of Monkey.
Where is it?
It's in a deep, dark box at the bottom of a deep, dark sea. You have to believe in everything you write. You have to believe that it's going to be a success. And I always try and make each book better than the one before as well, which is, you've got to keep moving forward like a shark, I guess.
I know you were a big fan of Ian Banks, so what have you learnt from his work that you would like to do?
That's interesting. The main thing I've learned is not to read anything by Ian M. Banks when I'm writing. Because I get discouraged. Because I think, I can't measure up to this. it's the way his prose sometimes just takes off and dances, and the scope of some of those culture books, it can be quite intimidating. You know, standing at a urinal next to a much taller man, it's difficult to produce under those circumstances. But I did have the great pleasure of sitting next to him at a group signing at EasterCon in Heathrow many years ago, and he had, at the time I'd only really had the recollection from Solaris, was the only book I had readily out and available, and I had a queue of about a good 7 or 8 people, and I think he must have had about 100 times that. Each of them loaded down with first edition hardbacks, and all queuing past me, looking at me like, "Oh, you poor bastard." I was gamely holding up my book. "What if you like all of those? You might like this." But afterwards, he turned around to me and went, "Don't worry about it." He said, "I once had to do a signing next to bloody Pratchett." But any more? Yeah.
Sorry. What's the most useful piece of writing advice or that you've had from anyone, or you've learned not from anyone but by doing it? What's the thing that's been most useful to you in your writing career?
Probably the one which is, don't tell anybody the plot of what you're writing until you finish the first draft. I would find that when I was younger, I would come up with hundreds and hundreds of these great ideas. I'd sit down in the pub and explain them over the course of an evening, and then they would be gone because I had told the story. Whereas if you keep it to yourself and put all that storytelling energy into the first draft, you can tell people, like, I'm writing a book about a monkey, and they go, "You idiot." But don't actually tell them the story of the plot, and you keep it all back so that you're all that kind of like wanting to entertain people and please people goes into the book instead of into the then that's kept me going. Whereas otherwise you exhaust, I think, the storytelling imperative too early, and it just becomes typing after.
Anyone else?
Thank you very much.